Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. On Fridays, we talk about the product owner role in Scrum. We talk about patterns and anti-patterns that relate to ours and the team's collaboration with the product owner. And we've also put together a course to help you navigate that relationship. There's 18 modules, nearly 8 hours of tools, techniques, videos, handouts, presentations you can use to help you and your team work better with your product owner. The course is available at bit.ly/coachyourPO. All lowercase, all one word. That's bit.ly/coachyourPO. And now, on to the show, the Product Owner Show. Hello everybody, welcome to our Friday TGIF and Product Owner episode this week with Paddy Corry. Hi Paddy, welcome back.
Hey Vasco, happy Friday everyone.
Absolutely, happy Friday. Hope you're enjoying the summer. And Paddy, we want to dive into the role of the product owner, because on Fridays we explore what, in my opinion, is one of the most critical relationships in a Scrum team, that of the Scrum Master and the product owner. So share with us what might have been one of the worst product owner anti-patterns that you've had to work with in your career.
I think for me, it is in the rush to move quickly, in the rush to get something done, and in the rush to give the customer what they might be asking for. It would be the tendency to provide a solution as part of the user story, or define the how as opposed to define the what. The reason why I think this is an anti-pattern, and the reason why I think this is, significant to discuss on its own as a thing that we need to discuss, it comes back to my background as a developer. And I suppose the main joy, or one of the main joys in the role, is solving problems. It's investigating what is being asked for and coming up with an elegant solution. Often when a customer asks for something, they might ask for something specific, but only because they're not aware of other possibilities. So I think when a product owner brings a very, very specific way of achieving a solution into the backlog, it limits the options for creativity in a team. And I remember one particular instance where, in the middle of a very stressful refinement session, where the most of the developers were downcast and unhappy, one of the developers said, he almost cried it out. He said, let us solve the problem. And it really resonated with me, because I've been in that position as a developer too. I want that pleasure, and when it's taken away from me, it's very limiting, and you become a data entry person rather than a problem solver.
And that drives quite a lot of other anti-patterns. But for me, the most important one, which you've alluded to, is exactly the fact that it kills creativity, and something that might have been solved elegantly with the help of the technology perspective by developers and testers ends up with a craft solution, because the product owner was in a hurry to provide a solution to the customer, promised that solution, and then we're in the books to develop something we didn't even think was a good idea in the first place.
Correct. And it calls back to the idea of being a leader in a team of knowledge workers. It requires different approaches than being a leader in a team of people who are awaiting instructions. Being a leader in a team of knowledge workers, it requires, being a little bit vulnerable, saying to the team, I don't know what the best solution is. I would like to hear what you think. And, as leaders, particularly when we're educated, sometimes we can believe that, well, the leader must have all the answers. And I feel like a product owner is very much in a leadership role in a team. And it can be a bit of a risk to come into a team and say, I know what the customer wants, but I'm going to let you guys tell me how we're going to do it.
Absolutely. It's a very important evolution, I think, in the relationship between the product owner and the team, to be able to come in and, as you said, say, I don't know, I'd like to hear what you think.
Right, exactly.
So now we turn our attention to what might be exactly the opposite. What might be the best kind of product owner behavior or approach that you have seen in your career, Paddy?
I'm reminded of a project, and it was a project at the time that I worked on, where the product owner, we decided very early that we were going to use just-in-time refinement on the project, which was we were going to defer refinement decisions until the last responsible moment. Our goal as a Scrum Master and product owner team was to make sure that we finished what we started and to make sure that we learned from what we finished before we went into the refinement of the next tasks. It was a new technique for me. I was, coming from a development background. My first experiences in software were on waterfall-ish projects. They weren't single pass, but they certainly weren't as agile as this was taking us. And I think I was very happy with how it went. Myself and the product owner had a very tempestuous relationship, for sure, because I would often be dealing with demands from the team like, oh, we need to do refinement. Like, we're nearly finished this, we need to do refinement. But getting from nearly finished to finished is sometimes the hardest part of the job. And finishing work before we start something new is a really great habit. And I think on that particular large piece of work, which we call the project, we actually did build a small product. It was a great learning experience for me about how deferring refinement until the last responsible moment can be really useful.
Absolutely. One of the things that comes to mind, you talked about waiting until you've finished something and then preparing based on the knowledge you've acquired, the next action. One of the things that comes to mind is also that at that moment, we are not anymore worrying about the hanging threads of a previous story, or we're not refining multiple stories at the same time, which, of course, leads to lack of focus. And in some cases, unfortunately, in my own experience, it leads to some developers preferring to refine one and then other developers preferring to refine another story. I am asking myself, however, what were the conditions in that particular team that enabled that to actually be an effective technique? Like, was it a small team? Were they really able to keep the one-piece flow, basically, which is what you're talking about, right? Finish something, then refine the next. Like, what do you think were, when you look back, the conditions that allowed that team to successfully use that approach?
I think two come to mind. The first is that we supported just-in-time refinement with a level of... So I always think of refinement in two ways because I'm a huge fan of this technique, user story mapping. I think we can go wide or we can go deep. And with this particular project or product, depending on your perspective, we went wide first. So we took the higher order items. What are we trying to achieve from start to finish? We built some of the detail under the backbone. So in order to achieve the volatility calculation, which was part of this project, what do we need to do? Okay, we need to involve our actuarial team. We need to define the calculation. We need to share it. We need to get agreement on the calculation. Okay, this looks like a high risk, high dependency part of the whole piece. So maybe our product owner needs to start working on that early, while the team are working on the UI, the skeleton, the setting up the development infrastructure. By having that wide view, and we used a big visible technique of wall with Post-its, sticky notes on the wall, striking them off as we worked through them, we were able to give the team visibility of what was coming down the pipeline. So they knew what was coming. They just didn't know the details. And we would defer refinement on the next items until we had the current items at least close to done. It was always the last responsible moment, as I said. The second contextual support was the level of dependencies that we had outward, from the team, and the level of dependencies that came in while we were working on this project. We didn't really have many interruptions. They were manageable. And in terms of dependencies out, they were relatively predictable. So this was a huge contextual support. I haven't always had that in teams that I've worked with.
Absolutely. But it also highlights that in certain conditions, it might actually be quite useful for the team, the product owner, and of course also for the stakeholders to actually take that step and go towards a just-in-time refinement, as you called it, or one-piece flow, as the lean process people would call it, so that it allows, as you said, like once you have the wider perspective, the story map, right, then we can dive into the details of each story when the time is right with a lot more knowledge than we would otherwise.
Agreed. And we can sometimes fall into the trap of believing that if we do refinement early, we'll be ready early. In fact, we fall into the trap of believing we're ready early, but we can never know as much early as we do at the last responsible moment. We always learn more. One of the things that it was healthy conflict between myself and the PO was how much detail should we have on the user story now, and when should we start elaborating on it? And it was always this idea of the last responsible moment was something that we discussed a lot and very, very useful to me.
Absolutely. Paddy, it's been a pleasure to have you here on the show this week. We've learned a lot from your stories and from your insights. So thank you very much for that. Unfortunately, however, we're close to the end. So where can we find out more about you and the work that you're doing?
If you want to look me up online, you'll find me on LinkedIn or on Serious Scrum, a publication on Medium. I'm sometimes writing articles on all things Scrum, particularly the Scrum values. So if you look up Serious Scrum on Medium, chances are I'll be hanging out there.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for that. We'll put all the links on the show notes so that people can find you easily. Thank you very much for your generosity with your time and your knowledge, Paddy.
Thanks for the invitation, Vasco. Really appreciate it.
One more week of the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast is over, but there's a lot more we have to share. We have developed our own membership site where you find a community of active and engaged Scrum Masters. In this site, you get access to exclusive content and get to interact with us, your podcast hosts, as well as the best Scrum Masters in the world. Join us at scrummastertoolbox.com/podcast and keep this podcast free of advertising. See you next week for one more week full of Scrum Master tips and tricks. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.